SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Mike Garner. I am a top guy with AdFree shows. I am currently living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Moved here from Arizona. Like everybody else, we shopped around for mortgages, trying to get the best deal. One of the things I wanted to do was give my buddy Conrad a shot. So I reached out to him and told him I was interested in going through the process. The team at Save with Conrad was awesome. There was a lot of communication. They were very quick to respond. They were very quick to listen to, what we needed, the complexities of selling our home with buying a new home. So it was absolutely fantastic. We felt comfortable using the team. We closed on time. The paperwork was hard to get to us. So they made sure that they sent those overnight. So there was no delays. I've tried to recommend Conrad and his team, Save with Conrad, to other people that were either looking for new mortgages or looking for ways to refi or, just trying to get on a better financial footing, because he often says that he doesn't say no. He says, maybe not right now. My name is Mike Garner, top guy with AdFree shows. Save with Conrad. Help me and my family get into our dream home.
Available lesson number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, man, you're back in the saddle, Pally. You're back in the saddle, Pally. Oh,
I don't even know a woman named Sally. Megan, if you're listening, I don't even know a Sally.
He used to call everybody Pally. But you must have had a good spring break or enjoyed the rains that we had this weekend. And boy, did we. But good to hear you just kick things off. We got a fun episode today. We're going to be going back, as you say, going back 20 years to a bunch of madness and the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, a little Kevin Nash, a little Ass Man, Billy Gunn, DDP, Monty Brown, Spike, USA. But before that, what do you want to chat about, Pally? We're doing a lot of fishing lately, aren't we?
We are doing some fishing expeditions, and man, we did have some crazy weather. It was predicted that you and I were both going to be in the path of Tornado Alley. Yep. We were both unscathed, but I know there were like more than 60 tornadoes here in the United States this past weekend, including a few dead here in Alabama. And I just, tornadoes. I'll be glad when, this season is over. It feels like, this March, April time period is always kind of dicey where we live. Right, Jeff?
Yeah. I heard the stat that at one time, it's crazy how just technology continues to change everything, but they, after, I don't know, once the storm blew through, that they went back and kind of looked at everything, and man, at one time, Connie, there were 24 tornadoes on the ground at the same time with that storm. It was absolutely crazy. Watching the radar, and it rained here, and right now the water is up. It's a complete mess. But yeah, people losing their lives. And I don't know if you saw this one video. There's a bunch of videos that went around about the weather, but there was one guy inside his house that he filmed the tornado that basically just kind of came over him, came through him, but, came through his area, and just the devastation. But, it's like when you see that, to me, it's like, okay, that movie Twister, that's kind of that sci-fi stuff. We now have the ability to see, God, it was to me in a lot of ways amazing that he was a teenager that would have the balls enough to sit there and film it all, or maybe not the smartest move in the world. He didn't completely get sheltered, but damn, Conrad, just technology and Mother Nature is undefeated. So prayers out to the folks that not only loss of life, but loss of all kinds of things. So it was a rough weekend for the people in the South, but I am grateful me and you kind of came through it with nothing but loads and loads of rain.
Yeah, we also need to mention that unfortunately we lost an independent wrestler over the weekend. I don't know if you saw this, Jeff.
Oh,
we had a 39-year-old pass away in the middle of a ring. I guess he had a heart attack.
Oh my God!
And that's not something that we talk about very often. And I'm thankful that this isn't something that we have to cover a lot. But Vince Steele was the name of the wrestler who passed away after a match, or in the middle of a match, I suppose, in Ridgefield Park. I mean, this is, I've heard a story like this before. We know with Jerry Lawler live on TV with Monday Night Raw. And years ago, I think even Ted DiBiase's father passed away in a similar way. And
Larry Latham, Moondog Spot.
You just, golly, dude, 39. You just hate to hear that.
Where's Ridgefield Park? Where is that?
I don't know.
Okay. Man. Yeah, Connie.
New Jersey.
Damn, dude. That's yeah. I mean, and you think too, and I have kind of voiced, and you have too, when you hear these, I'll call them state athletic commissions, that tax, and we're not true sport. But on the flip side of that, you just wonder how the young man felt, and I'll call him young man because 39 is a young man. Man, thoughts and prayers. Life is short. Boy, reminded of that so many times. Yeah. Wow, Conrad, I did not hear that. So appreciate you sharing that. We lost.
By the time everybody hears this, Monday Night Raw, of course, will be in the rearview mirror. Here in Alabama today, Jeff, it's going to be Monday Afternoon Raw on Netflix. It's 3 Eastern, 2 Central, because they are abroad. And, of course, the entire wrestling world is waiting with bated breath. Of course, by the time everyone hears this, they know exactly what happened. But I think when people look back at the famous or infamous Hulk Hogan turn from Bash at the Beach 96, yes, we remember the leg drop on the Macho Man. But what really solidified the heel turn and the movement and the moment is the interview mid-ring with Mean Gene, with Scott and Kevin at his shoulders, all the trash raining in. It was the promo where Hogan explained why he did what he did. So we've seen what John Cena did, and now I believe we might hear the why. Is that what you expect today?
That's hard to, Conrad, it is so much more public knowledge. What we don't know, or what I certainly don't know is so today is the 17th, the 24th, 31. What do we got? 5 Raws before Mania. I'm ballparking it. 5 Raws, 5 SmackDowns. In that, how many do we have Cena available for? What's the, just all the thought process that's going to go into where are we going with it. It's a live event, which I think could really, really work to the advantage of the entire process. An international market, I think you said Brussels. They obviously don't get the product very often, let alone a Raw, let alone a show building toward Mania. So that I think we've seen the international crowds, no matter what promotion you're working for, WWE, AEW, TNA. You could just go down through the whole list. It just kind of gets to a different fever pitch. So, in a lot of ways, the crowd, can become the story. But boy, oh boy, I think if they kind of put the pedal to the metal and smash the gas, I think you could see some electric TV when Cody confronts him. Now, that's an assumption. We may not get that far in the story. It may be Cena just kind of laying the framework, or I don't know. I'm just trying to think, and I haven't given this any thought, Conrad. You kind of hit me with it as far as all that. But you take going back to that Hogan scenario with all the trash being thrown, the crowd, I don't say was the story, but boy, they certainly enhanced it. So I think the recipe for an electric segment is certainly there. All the stars are aligning, being it's an international crowd. But man,
it is a risk, though. I think I don't mean to cut you off, but to take a perennial babyface and arguably the biggest star in the WWE in the last 20 years, John Cena, and take him to an international audience like this. Like, we all know this is true, John. After you've had, let's say, a heel gets injured, your top heel gets injured. He goes down. He's got an ACL tear. He's going to be back in, 10 months, a year, whatever it may be. When he comes back, even though he left as the absolute hottest heel, when he comes back, he gets a hero's welcome. Like, people are giving him a big pop because, oh my God, he's back. And I know John Cena has been back, at least on television, pay-per-view for a little bit, but this will be the first time and realistically the last time he's going to be in that country. So it is going to be interesting to see, do they cheer him at first and he has to turn them? How is that all going to play out? We'll see.
They'll cheer him at first. I just think that's where I think we said it last week or on the YouTube live or whatever it may be. It's just, cards played right, dominoes fall in the right direction. Cody really has an opportunity to go to the next level. Not saying he's not way, 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 way up there, but I just think that it's going to be positioned right. You think back to that presser when Cena talked about what's best for business. I think those words are going to play out, and I think our man Cody will be the beneficiary of that.
Well, we're all the beneficiary of learning the big news. You've been teasing it for a little while, and I'm ready to call you on the carpet right now, Jeff. What the hell's going on in Quincy? Spill it.
Friday, the brand reveal. You're going to have a lot of fun with it. Conrad, I'm curious because I think I'm going to FaceTime you this Friday when we actually do the brand reveal. I want your real-time reaction, and I want to see the wheels in your brain start thinking through merch and all that. Logo's done. So Quincy Baseball, it is having our brand reveal party. We did this several years ago with Springfield Lucky Horseshoes and, the initial shot, because before that, it was the Springfield Sliders. So, and that people had gotten comfortable with that, and people, like anything, kind of resist change. But boy, oh boy, I think now people in the market, they couldn't think of anything other than choose baseball, choose baseball. I think we're headed down that same track, and I'm excited to see the merch fly off the shelves, because that was one thing that I've seen hot merch items in my day and wrestling and all kinds of different examples of that, but I never really thought the Springfield Lucky Horseshoe merch would catch on as quickly as it did. So sold in all 50 states, and I think in a matter of, a very short time frame. So we're looking forward to ramping that up. And Conrad, that's in my DNA. Hell, it's in your DNA to get things rolling and promote. So we're fired up. Friday, March the 21st. Gonna be fun.
Can't wait to see what's going on there, and I can't wait for us to spend a little bit of time talking about TNA from 20 years ago, including some news from some friends of ours at the time. It's written here in the Observer. Frankie Kazarian quit TNA after the February 15th tapings, and he's expected to sign a developmental contract with WWE. Dave said there'd been rumblings about him going to WWE for weeks, and I guess he'd even spoken with other wrestlers about leaving. Dave would even write that Tommy Dreamer, who's working with WWE, of course, had been hot to sign him for quite a while. And Dave is basically explaining that Frankie's been working with TNA without a contract. His deal expired months ago. He never signed a new deal, and it was positioned to Meltzer like this is something that just slipped through the cracks. And Dave would even say there's nuclear heat on Bob Ryder for this oversight. The idea that creative is pushing wrestlers who aren't even under contract. Is the implication here that Bob Ryder knew he wasn't under contract and didn't notify creative, or what the heck happened with Kazarian?
Oh, Connie, let's dive off into this, because there's going to be some fun stops along the way. And to give a set point, it helps me as much or more than our My World listeners. But so 05, we're going back 20 years, Destination X in the spring, and it was that time frame, obviously before Spike TV. So we did Nashville, 104 episodes along, or something, about 2 years. And then, we made the decision to go to Orlando and Fox Sports Net. But there is no doubt about kind of where things were at, in that I call it the grind, but very, very budget conscious. I believe that by this point we had me and my father had brought a potential replacement for an investor, and it was very clear that the Carters did not want anybody in. They were at least comfortable enough in the investment to keep it rolling. That being said, a super tight budget. And, we came to a time frame, and, if to dive into the Bob Ryder part of it, nuclear heat. And Bob, what a journey he had, the ups and downs. But, when he went into the Hall of Fame, the comments I made, and it was echoed. There was a lot of folks that said kind of an attention to detail. Nothing ever slipped through the cracks. He was a multitasker, travel and talent and all the kind of the back end office things. Rody did the creative, basically administrative and notes and everything that went with that. But Bob really did everything else as far as, I'll call it from a talent relations and even a little bit of creative as far as the organizational stuff. But Bob, again, his skill set. So when something like this would happen that, oh, you mean Frankie's contract? I never bought that it slipped through the cracks. And Bob had an interesting relationship, like a lot of folks. Sometimes he would be on the in with Dixie Carter. Sometimes he'd be on the out. And I always tried to read the room that, okay, now what's going on right here? And Bob was certainly, and people will tell you this, I'm not just saying Frankie, multiple talent. Bob was very good to guys and tried to help them out to the point that he often had a real conflict of interest. He wanted to do what he could for each individual talent. And sometimes he crossed the line and he would try to make decisions that candidly he would get out of his box. And that would be the thing. He got let go 3 different times. And every time was, Bob, you got out of your box. You're not in that decision-making set of circumstances. And so, he would err not on the side of the quote-unquote office. He would err on the side of the boys. And that's how I looked at the Frankie situation. But to Frankie's defense and Bob's defense, there were a lot of times you just can't have everybody under contract because you put them under contract, then they expect work. Again, TNA early days, what a challenge it was to really a day in and day out to balance the talent relations department.
It's interesting because Frankie, according to the Torch, was not happy with Dusty Rhodes. He felt like he had been disrespected by Dusty because Frankie, if you'll recall, was one of the fellows who was protesting the way he was used in the Jeff Hammond situation at the prior pay-per-view. But even if he was upset, boy, he left what I would call the right way. He wrote on social media, "I'm in fact no longer with TNA Wrestling. I'd been wrestling without a contract since last year, and I made the decision to end my partnership with the company and pursue other opportunities in the world of professional wrestling. I cannot stress enough that this was my decision and no one's fault. Sometimes we reach points in our personal and professional lives that we must make decisions that hurt a great deal, and this has been one of them. I want to thank everyone involved in TNA. From day one, I was always treated with respect and class. I had the most fun in my career these past 2 years with TNA. I also want to thank Dixie Carter, a truly classy woman and someone I consider a good friend and an even better person. Jerry and Jeff Jarrett gave me a platform to do what it is I love on a national level, and for that, I will always be grateful. I thank them for having the confidence in me to represent their company as a champion on 2 different occasions. Everyone in the office, from Bob Ryder to Tim Welch, Bill Banks, Scott Hudson, Jeremy Borash, the amazing announce duo of Mike Tenay and Don West, I consider terrific people and very good friends. The friendships I've forged in TNA mean more to me than anything. It's with a heavy heart that I say goodbye." Man, you want to talk about leaving the right way. Could he have done a better job?
And that's like to this day. I mean, the things I've kind of learned, the real wisdom, it really, in the good times, quote unquote, character's really not revealed in the, and I will say bad times, but the difficult times, the times of transition, that's when characters are revealed. And, Frankie, as you just said, left the right way. And I have seen him show his integrity ever since I've known him. He always handled business like business.
The speculation in the Observer is that this is the tip of the iceberg, and there could be a whole contingent of guys ready to leave TNA and jump to WWE. And I guess Shane Douglas has a little bit of heat on him, because this is interesting that we're hearing behind the scenes. He's somebody who maybe stirred up BG James and Kazarian and Michael Shane and all these guys. But at the same time, he's been positioned as like the liaison between the wrestlers and the office. And so that's going to mean that he's got some heat on him already. I don't know. I mean, you mentioned earlier that Bob at times would have to feel like he's serving different masters. He wants to do right by his friends and do right by the company. If that really is the way Shane felt about having guys put over a non-wrestler like Jeff Hammond, I'm sure he's looking out for the boys, and that's what you want. But boy, it's a slippery slope when he's supposed to be in an office capacity too, right?
Yeah, and look, there was a couple of times through this research that I went back to kind of, I don't want to say default, but a lot of times I have to filter that as opposed to, let me see if I can recollect this is exactly how it went down. And then I take another step back and go from 30 to 50,000 feet. And I got to go, okay, let me consider the source here. And because look, whether it's Dave or Wade or Mike Johnson or Powell or whoever is writing, they're making money. They've got to write a newsworthy story. B, they're probably doing the best they can. C, they're hearing maybe one side, best case 3 or 4, but one side of the story as well. So you kind of have to filter as much as you can. But I do remember, again, this is a time then we'll call it a little office politics, a little bit of inexperience, a little bit of just the nature of the business. I was champion and people, it rubbed them the wrong way, namely Dixie Carter. And so this is the Dusty Rhodes era, and let's give Dusty a shot. So Dusty was coming in and he was putting his team in place, and Terry Taylor at one time worked very closely with Dixie, but I think Terry was either wanting more money, and probably rightly so. Was he leaving? Was he staying? But they kind of were sliding Shane, and obviously Shane and Dusty had a good relationship. So again, it's quite the soap opera, if you will. But the Hammond thing, and we covered that on another episode, and it ruffled a lot of, there were a lot of guys that they didn't give 2 shits that Jeff Hammond was on network TV for 4 hours every Sunday and had massive PR opportunities at his fingertips, that he did do a lot of press that these guys were never aware of. Again, brand building. So quite the controversy that wrapped around the Jeff Hammond match during this time. But and Shane, I get it. He wants to build credibility, probably in his new position, that he is building confidence that, hey, Shane's going to look out for us. So there you have it, Connie. That's that section best I can give it.
Even Meltzer would say, talking about Jeff Hammond, TNA owes him a lot. If you know it, but Hammond is tremendously influential within Fox Sportsnet and has helped push things like the specials. In fact, Hammond's pushing the product to FSN Brass helped allow them to buy their way onto the network in the first place. And the network liked the idea of Hammond involved because of their own TV idea, how NASCAR and pro wrestling go together, even if they probably don't. I know you tried that at different points a few times, and certainly there's been a few stabs at that with WWE and WCW. Do you think that there is significant crossover between pro wrestling and NASCAR fans?
I believe in the 90s, massive crossover. Now, I don't believe NASCAR is the same product today. I don't think it's anywhere close to the same demo. I think, it's probably aged up. But if you look at television viewership, I mean, wrestling television viewership, the median age has definitely aged up. I can remember, I mean, Dixie absolutely freaking out when it would, I think we would jump over 45, and it was nice to be, you know, in that 40, 41 range. You know, the sweet spot's 18 to 34, but okay, 18 to 49. And I'm like, hey, we're still in the main demo. But man, you jump up around 45, 46. Oh my God, we're getting old. Well, in today's television world, you'd kill for that. Now they're 55, 56, 57. But again, the crossover in NASCAR in the 90s, massive. I saw the data. I saw, I'm trying to think. That was a NASCAR deck. What NASCAR fans liked. Yeah, it wasn't a wrestling deck. God almighty. I just had anyway, it's way up there. You know, country music and rock music. It kind of through the, so anyway, I'm positive of that. Conrad, today, not so much. I think there's still some. That's why I think there's a big debate. Like, what is the MMA professional wrestling crossover? What is that really? I don't know.
It's funny you bring that up because I do have a quote I want to get your take on, but something there's no debating is that Magic Spoon is the real deal. If you love nostalgia, and clearly you do because you're listening to this podcast, you're going to love Magic Spoon. By now, you already know that Magic Spoon makes high protein, zero sugar cereal and treats. They're all reinvented from your childhood. It tastes just like what you grew up eating, but without all the sugar, and now with a ton of protein. You've heard me brag on it before that the treats, the high protein treats from Magic Spoon, are crispy, crunchy, airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. You've heard me talk about the different flavors like marshmallow, chocolatey peanut butter, and dark chocolate. But my favorite is double chocolate. I even saw a tweet about that this morning. And he said, okay, Conrad, we'll see what the hype is all about. I'll report back quickly. And just a few minutes later, he posted, no lies detected, 5 out of 5. It's the real deal. If you're looking for something that tastes great and is going to curb your hunger appetite, or maybe you got a craving for something sweet. Listen, in the South, we all say that. Oh, now I need something sweet. What you need is Magic Spoon, bunch of protein and no sugar. Come on now. How about the new granola? That's what I'm excited to brag about. Magic Spoon is branching out. You knew about the cereal. You knew about the high protein treats. But now the brand new granola packs 13 grams of protein and 0 added sugars. That's right. And delicious flavors like dark chocolate almond, honey almond, and even peanut butter. So go get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/myworld, or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/myworld for $5 off. So Jeff, you mentioned the potential crossover appeal, if you will, between wrestling and MMA. And it's funny that you say that, because we've got a quote from the CEO of TNT Sports when they were on the Varsity podcast. And Lewis said this: AEW is not combat sports. It's sort of a hybrid between entertainment and sports. So we don't consider that 100% sports. So combat sports like UFC, which is a fantastic property, has perked our interest. Now, this, of course, is the talk right now because it wasn't that long ago. And I think over the weekend, we actually had some reports out that said, hey, UFC buys are down and ESPN is not happy and UFC is not happy. And UFC's made it clear inside the tent, so to speak, that they want to be on Netflix, which makes sense considering a WWE potential crossover. I mean, UFC and WWE both owned by TKO. I get it. But the buys aren't really there and they're down. So it does feel like the UFC may be facing a crossroads where they need to reinvent themselves. Now, they've done this a few times before. When they first started the Ultimate Fighter television show, later when they did the deal with ESPN Plus, and of course they even had a Fox stint. So now what's next for them? This is a real question mark, because if you'll recall, WWE helped build the Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter then goes to Fox, When UFC leaves Fox, here comes WWE. So they've just sort of chased each other all over, the map as far as content and the different distribution platforms. But now when you've got the CEO of TNT Sports saying, maybe that's perked our interest. Wouldn't that be interesting if you had a TKO property and AEW both under the Time Warner umbrella? You're muted, pal. Jeff, you with us?
Oh boy, hold on.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Can you?
Yes, sir. You're back. Do you have any thoughts?
I do, of course I do. You'll come up with a better little slogan than I win, but whoa, strange bedfellows. I don't know about that, but it's a different audience. I will say that, and for so many years, and you can kind of look at the growth through the years, that the quote there says a lot. Dave Silva, can you pull that back up? Because I think it says a lot. Yes, it's not combat sports. It's a hybrid between entertainment and sports. Absolutely. And I think the selling of sponsorship has to go down the lane. No, it's not sport. It's entertainment. We're over in that world. Look at the demos, that world, sell it as such. The product integration that you can do. It's like you can't really ask a quarterback or a point guard to integrate product, but you can on a comedy or a variety or a sitcom or whatever it may be. But man, wouldn't that be interesting if UFC split up? Because you look at WWE. Yes, they're on Netflix, but they're also in the Peacock family and the CW family. When you kind of step back, yes, Netflix has got all the sexy news as of late, but when you really take a step back and look at the WWE model, they got their toes in the water everywhere. Curious to see if UFC were to take that strategy.
It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think eventually everything will be with Netflix with WWE? Do you think that would be a goal of theirs?
No.
I don't know.
I think the Peacock deal winds up getting renewed.
Bigger and better. I agree.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen, nobody's talking about this out loud because wrestling fans just got excited about it. But I think they're being kind of smart about it. WWE, because these Tom, Dick, and Harry investors at these different, I'm saying outside the tent, non-wrestling people, what they're all trained and conditioned to know is that wrestling is, for lack of a better word, WWE. And so we've always sort of known that, but I think this is the time where it's really going to come in handy for WWE. Let me give you an example. We've talked about the brand before. It's not a tissue. It's not a Kleenex. It's a tissue. It's not a Coke. It's a soda, that sort of thing. But they've just become, it's not a bandage. It's not a Band-Aid. It's a bandage. But WWE has become so interchangeable that I think the people who are negotiating right now with WWE think that wrestling and WWE are interchangeable. So by WWE promising, oh yeah, you're going to have all the WWE content, what they're not saying maybe is the WCW content. Because all of a sudden WCW, which used to just be behind the paywall on with Peacock, and then before that the WWE Network, now all of a sudden it's on YouTube. I think the highest and best use for all of that old archive stuff that's not really moving the needle, we'll call it the territory stuff, is on YouTube. Why wouldn't WWE let the global free market sort of dictate, hey, I don't know what value this has. We'll just throw it up rather than keeping it on the shelf and get paid for it, because the people who were paying us big money for WWE content don't value this or even know what the hell it is.
Mm-hmm. Times are changing, pal. Times are. I can tell by the grin on your face. We're thinking the same thing.
Let's talk about the Torch back in 2005. There's some talk in TNA that Terry Taylor may be up for the VP of Talent Relations job in WWE. Should the slot be vacated by Laurinaitis, since Taylor has worked behind the scenes in WWE and has a good rep? Taylor continues to work in the production truck during TV tapings and pay-per-views and spends time with the wrestlers in the locker room earlier in the day in the role of an agent. At this point, I think Johnny Ace had been in this role for like less than a year. And JR had been, it's been said that he had trained him as a replacement. I don't know how real that is. But I do find it interesting that once again, Terry Taylor finds himself being quoted in the Torch, or not quoted in the Torch, but there's a story about Terry Taylor in the Torch. Did you think at any point he was really going to replace Johnny Ace and become the head of talent relations? That's just kind of hard to imagine.
Yeah, you talk about wrestling bubble, if you will, and all that. During this time in my career, Conrad, there was so much going on in my life, personally and professionally. I really didn't give that a second thought. I'm not even qualified to give an answer that, I don't recall me ever thinking that, oh no, Terry or anybody, they're going to go back in the office job, because we were, again, running on a shoestring budget. Now, Bob Ryder was, there were some key individuals that just were, but look, at any one time, and again, growing up in this business, you understand nobody's irreplaceable, certainly in the office. It's just not the reality of it.
Let's talk about Walt Wilson. It's written here, the company's vice president of marketing also quit this past week. I'll admit, I am not familiar with that name. What can you tell us about Walt?
I was about to ask you, Conrad, have you ever even heard the name Walt Wilson? My guess would be no, because he was short-lived. And look, as we begin to grow, kind of, again, hindsight's 2020. There became a point during this time frame, there was some pressure because Dixie's background was PR and marketing, mainly PR, and fantastic at that in the music business, and had a hell of a Rolodex and a client list. But the marketing side of it, and to market professional wrestling, it is a unique skill set. And I have seen, man, especially when I went back to WWE, I'll recall a meeting, in a live event meeting, and I think we were either taking a break or we were waiting on somebody to show up. And so we had some time to kill, and there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 of us in this meeting, but we were waiting on another 4 or 5. And we were into the conversation, and we're talking about, this guy used to work in the live event department, this guy. And then there was a little discussion. Oh, no, they were in marketing. And then the guy goes, do you know how many marketing folks, head of marketing folks, or VPs or SVPs we've had in marketing? It's just like the massive amount of turnover. And so we got in that discussion. And then as I kind of look at it, and back on my TNA days, Walt was a great dude. Very nice guy. Comes from the music business, didn't understand wrestling. He was game, set, match before he walked in the door, just because you got to have a real, not just a passion. You've got to understand the nuts and bolts of the industry, in that, if you're in that marketing role, because a lot of folks come in and think, oh yeah, I've got a Rolodex, I can sell, I can do this. But if you can't wrap your head around the product, and know, not speak from your head, but speak from your heart about this, you are, swimming upstream. You're never going to close the deal, because you're just not. And I'm not talking about just sponsorship. I'm talking about closing a deal internally, because marketing has to take what creative presents them and then create a message with it. And you just got to know the industry. And so, again, Walt, nice guy, but he wasn't around long. And it was a Dixie hire from the music business.
It's written in the Observer, Alex Shelley, who's not being used, asked for a release in January and still hasn't heard whether or not he's getting it. This is pre-Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley, pre-Paparazzi Productions, Alex Shelley. He hasn't been used since early November 2004. Why don't you think Alex Shelley had more immediate success? Was it just a crowded roster and it was hard to find a place for everybody, or what was it?
Incredibly hard. And you look during this time frame. Look, Alex, I don't want to say when he came to the door, because everybody improves, but he was very good. And, teaming in with Chris, and shit, they're still reaping the fruits of their chemistry as a tag team to this day. But during this time frame, Dusty didn't see a lot of value like others in the X division. And so shelf space, Alex did nothing wrong, but there just wasn't enough room on the roster. And nothing he did, or it just, that was the nature of the beast during this time frame.
We got to spend a little bit of time talking about Billy Gunn. We mentioned that he had just recently debuted, and we were at least calling him at first the New Age Outlaw before we realized, hey, we don't own that. We can't do that. Of course, they tried to trademark it, but WWE raises enough stink that eventually you guys just change it to the Outlaw. Interestingly enough, I know I just saw a picture this past weekend from resident gimmick attorney Mike Dawkins. Billy Gunn owns the New Age Outlaw trademark now. That's kind of a challenge, you know, like on the one hand, you want these WWE guys because you want their brand and their IP and you want their star power. But if you have to really start over with a completely new name, that becomes challenging. I mean, I'm not saying it's a deal breaker. Obviously it's not, because physically when you see Billy Gunn, you know, oh, that's Billy Gunn of the New Age Outlaws. But from a radio standpoint, or just if you're reading it in print, if you don't have the image to go with it, and we're calling him something else, that becomes tricky, right?
Oh, over and over and over you see this. And I always go back and, you know, not very often, but there was, you know, times when I first went to WWF early in my career, there would be a commission or, you know, whatever, administrator. Oh, wow, Jeff Jarrett's your real name. Yeah. But, you know, so some people, but the value of that is hard to put a price on because, you know, what you just said. I mean, you could go down through the history of it. I mean, there's a reason that The Rock went back and either negotiated or Vince or whatever the deal was, or Hulk Hogan got Hulk. Just the different, it is a challenge once you really firmly establish that IP and then don't have it. It's confuse them, you lose them, pal. You can really do that with character brand identity.
Did you ever think about any other names for yourself at any point? I mean, I know you started as Jeff Jarrett, but was there ever serious consideration on a different name?
No, and I do not know all the exact details, but, you know, Mo Man was adamant. Go by your name. Don't get into the character. And I think he had probably seen that a couple of times in the, we'll call it mid 80s, you know, when you truly give a guy a character and you know that, okay, that character is forever with that company, you lose your leverage. Like the day that you kind of walk in the door. But a lot of folks, you know, you're in that non-leveraged position. So you kind of have to roll with the punches, but no, I never ever considered anything other than my name.
I just asked Chat GPT if they had a good nickname or a good name for you, and it gave me a nickname, the Southern Striker. And I thought, okay. But then I said, I need a name that sounds real, not a nickname. Chat GPT says, what about Jared Steele, Cameron Drake, Gavin Cole, Ethan Brooks, and Wyatt Cage? I could see you being an Ethan Brooks, you know, remembering that Garth Brooks, when you first got hot with your character on the scene, if you're going to go with Brooks, you need something else. I could see it.
Chat, that AI stuff, it's freaking amazing, is it not?
It's super fun. It's almost as fun as seeing how hard you can get your ding dong. And we know the answer thanks to BlueChew.com. Have some better sex with BlueChew, and you too can be the Southern Striker. Stroke after stroke after stroke. The hits just keep coming because BlueChew is the original brand offering chewable tablets for better sex. And starting now, BlueChew is offering a combo so strong it'll knock your socks off and your neighbor's socks off. You're going to have to move towns with the amount of noise you'll be making. BlueChew Max has arrived, and it combines the active ingredients of Viagra and Cialis into one chewable. This combo acts fast and lasts. So guys, be ready when she needs it and get your first month of BlueChew free. Great sex is a few clicks away. So sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA. They're prepared and shipped directly to your door. And the best part is it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. So make your life easier by getting harder and discover your options at BlueChew.com. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try your first month of BlueChew free when you use the promo code MyWorld. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's promo code MyWorld. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast. So let's talk about some behind the scenes maneuvering. It's written here that Dusty wants DDP to win the belt on March 13th. And it just says it straight up. Jeff doesn't want to lose the title. He had said he feels DDP shouldn't be the guy to be champion. Others say Jeff and Jerry believe Jeff has super heel heat, not admitting what he has is the wrong kind of heat. The resentment of Rhodes picking DDP to win it only continues the issues where all the guys who were around from the start feel like they brought all the new guys in, put them on top, and they are pushed like the stars. Jeff, you're in the middle of this. Obviously, DDP is a Dusty guy. That's not a secret. Everybody knows that. Were you pushing back on the idea of a Diamond Dallas Page championship run? You're muted, pal. Got it.
I'm trying to keep myself where I'm not shuffling papers on mic when you're doing that commercial read.
Hey, so let me show you in the future. We're on StreamYard, the bottom left-hand corner. See the mute right there? If the button pressing gets tricky for you, you can just hit that button.
You're brilliant.
You got either one. Either one.
I'm not tech savvy. It's funny. Anyway, I'm texting a guy right now saying, hey, I'm going to leave that tech stuff up to you. Okay. Not once did Dusty ever come to me and say, hey, I want to make DDP champion. I think this is newsletter clickbait, if you will. And we've talked about this, but there was always the discussion on, okay, switch the title, whoever it may be, who are the heel opponents, and where that it was just such a, and not under contract. DDP didn't want to work that much, period. I don't know how many matches he had consistently after this run. I mean, I don't think a lot, but that's why it's just kind of clickbait, because I don't think DDP would have wanted to be champion, honestly, at this point.
That seems like it's just sour grapes. When a report comes out and it says, oh, Jeff doesn't want to lose the title. That's from another wrestler in the locker room who, for whatever reason, doesn't think you should be champion or doesn't understand why you're the champion, or they want to be champion, or whatever it is. And that just feels like telephone, telegram, telewrestler to me.
Yeah. But again, I'll go back to considering the source. It's a lot better story to create a little controversy. We're going to make DDP champion. That's why I really never minded. Conrad, I did some media last week for Acclaim, and that's rocking and rolling. But the guy, I mean, he came right ask out. It was a direct question. Jeff, do you think pro wrestling tribalism, I think he said, is a good thing or a bad thing or something like this? And it was very easy for me to answer. I said, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Now there's some nasty things said, and I'm not condoning that. And, all the, I'll call it kind of the nonsense noise, but for the most part, it's a passion that the worst thing that can happen is people not talking about us. And so if there's an article that Jeff doesn't want to drop the title to DDP for whatever reason, I take that as a positive. Conrad, what's your thoughts on wrestling tribalism? Do you think it's a good, or just the very top line, a positive or a negative for the industry?
More negative than positive.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
Because I think it becomes less about enjoying the product and more about, I want that product to fail. When we start rooting for, because sometimes, and you and I know this, when emotions get involved, we all want to win. But sometimes when we have below the line thinking, we stop focusing as much on us winning and we focus more on we want them to lose. And I think that there's a contingent of wrestling tribalism that's really focused on one promotion or another losing. Oh, these guys are losers. I hate them. I hope they go out of business. This is a joke. Why would anyone work there? Who can watch this? That's bad for the industry.
And let me ask you, do you think said fan or said social media user, and I'm not saying personality, whoever it may be, do you think there are fans out there that truly want the promotion to lose, maybe not lose, like, do you mean lose or just not beat their favorite promotion in rating or houses or whatever it may be? You think they want them to go out of business?
I'll be honest. I've been watching Alabama football, SEC football my whole life.
Roll Tide.
Not once have I really cared or cared to remember what the ratings were, what the attendance was, what the game was, none of that. But I also was not silly enough to say, because listen, and not everybody will get this, but you get it. The Alabama Auburn rivalry is clearly 1A or 1B in football rivalries. I mean, it is huge. But as much as my Alabama fans hate Auburn, they don't want Auburn to go away. Well, you have to, Auburn has to exist or the rivalry goes away. And so the idea that that the tribalism ever spills over into, oh, they're going out of business in 6 months. Why would you want that?
No.
So I just think if we're not caring in the idea that there's tribalism behind, yay, Giants, boo, Jets. Okay, that's fun. That's healthy. That's normal. I hope the Jets go out of fucking business. What? No, that didn't make any sense.
And I just wonder, the folks that say that, do they really mean that, or are they just channeling their own personality of professional wrestling and saying a bunch of BS? They don't really mean that. I don't know. It just,
who knows? Here's what I do know. AJ Styles back here in February of 2005 was talking about wanting a big raise in 6 months when his contract is up. He's talking about how much he loves the X Division style and he prefers it. And he loves getting to wrestle talent like Chris Sabin and Petey Williams. And it's been said openly, behind the scenes, of course, that he would love to wrestle on SmackDown against Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero if he doesn't get that raise. But he feels like the TNA pay-per-views have been killing WWE pay-per-views. He says, our pay-per-views have been killing theirs. The X Division is something that WWE will try to come after because we've made such a big impact in professional wrestling. A lot of people forget what the X stands for. It stands for extreme. And I don't mean tables and chairs. I mean, these guys are athletes. They do stuff that you've never seen or even thought was possible. So clearly we know he's right. That is going to become the style with WWE, maybe first with NXT, then AEW, and now WWE. And it's just everywhere now. I think most people would agree that as far as a national stage, I'm not talking about Ring of Honor as a tape trader, but I mean, on television, TNA is the precursor for all that with the X Division.
I agree. And, when I read about this contract, thinking about the different guys that you have to sit across the table and negotiate contracts, at the end of the day, AJ Styles, every time he came to the table, it's just, he was never abrasive, but at the end of the day, you knew without beyond a shadow of a doubt, he had leverage, because could he go somewhere else? Yep. All the time. He was very loyal to the brand, and I'm super grateful for that. But his skill set, every year he got better. He got better on the mic. He got better on character development, his athletic ability. I say he continued to fine tune it and all that kind of stuff. But he was, from day one, the anchor of the X Division. And as we like to, in those days, we prided ourselves being, and Dixie would say in numerous meetings, we're number 2, we try harder. That was the Avis slogan. But, I always like to put us in the bucket, whether it's dealing with Toys R Us or the DVD vendors or whoever it may be. We're the alternative, period. I mean, we are the alternative brand. And I think that goes a long way. And at the very top of that list, you can put a bunch of things in that bucket while we're the alternative, but at the very top was the X Division. We were alternative because we had that style of wrestling and we featured it in a very prominent role.
We got to, I got to ask you, I think we've touched on it before, but in your opinion, and I know you weren't necessarily involved at this moment, but when AJ Styles left TNA, did that feel like the end of the original TNA for you? When he leaves TNA and goes to New Japan, his contract is not renewed, and there's going to be Total Nonstop Action or Impact Wrestling moving forward, sans Alan Jones. It just doesn't feel the same to me.
That's, you know what? So, if I could get out maybe the production schedule and look through all that, but you probably hit the nail on the head. When I sent in my letter of resignation, knowing not just the ownership structure was not going to change. And, they had basically told me and Toby no. And then when you kind of looked at obviously TV and all that, but yeah, Conrad, when he said, I'm out, from a brand perspective, forward facing, I would imagine that was the final nail in the coffin for the original OG TNA fan. The Hogan years were ball shot after ball shot after ball shot on that. But AJ leaving would be the final nail in the coffin for that brand. Yeah.
And then Sting's last match. I mean, Sting was sort of one of the last guys, I felt like, when TNA was on top, so to speak. So it just felt like if you were a longtime TNA fan, when you're no longer a regular, when Sting leaves, when AJ leaves, it's like,
yeah,
it's not the same anymore.
No.
Dusty Rhodes comes around, allegedly, according to the Observer, and calls DDP to say that Jeff is finally getting strong heel heat. They're happy with him as champion, so we're not going to move forward with the title switch. And Dave would also report that you had at least initiated conversations with The Rock. I guess Rock told Jarrett he's interested in talking after his schedule gives him some time to breathe when he's done promoting Be Cool. And it's been described as being, well, it couldn't be more positive as far as The Rock being cordial to you. Now, of course, we know this didn't wind up happening, but did you ever get far enough along the road to have a serious conversation with The Rock about doing something with TNA, or was it all just polite?
Polite. Did you say the word polite? I think cordial was the word I was going to use.
Yes.
And look, at the end of the day, being one of the boys my whole life as well, at the end of the day, before you even start the conversation, where if whether it's promoter talent conversation, one of the boys to the other boys, hey, I'm going to this new promotion to this. It always comes back on to, hey, we can have niceties all we want, but man, let's talk about dollars. And knowing this guy's on his way to being the biggest Hollywood attraction in all of Hollywood, that we were never going to cross that bridge. But from one third generation talent to another, doesn't hurt to have the conversation, Connie.
I do want to ask you about Michael Shane. It makes the news here that he's been asked to change his name to Matt Bentley. I guess Mike Shane actually trademarked his name for pro wrestling years prior to this. He was one half of the NWA Tag Team Champs when TNA first started. And I guess maybe to stick it to TNA now, he notifies you guys that Michael Shane needs to pick a new name. I own Mike Shane, the trademark. So Matt Bentley is the new way of the land. Of course, I don't know why Mike Shane thought WWE would be interested in his name, because when he went there, well, they gave him a new name. It's in the Observer that for whatever I can't believe this is real. For whatever this is worth, TNA officials were under the impression Roddy Piper was just doing WrestleMania and he would be returning to TNA shortly after that. That could wind up happening like that, but if it does, it'll probably only be if WWE doesn't want to use Piper any longer after seeing him. Of course, anytime there is one of your talents who are going to go do stuff with WWE, you got to wonder, they coming back? How's this going to go? Would it have been a big loss? Did it matter one way or another in the scheme of things about Piper, in your opinion?
No. I mean, Roddy was, for the most part, the book tour, and he was fun to work with. Roddy's Roddy. But look, a guy of his stature, and, when you really drill down and look at the career of Roddy, that guy, it's his career is amazing. But never in our wildest dreams did we ever look at Roddy at more than a one-off. If he could come back and do something, great. But he was never, quote unquote, figured in long-term. Never.
The Torch is saying that management is upset with Raven. They're blaming him, not Dustin, for the quality of their matches. Do you remember Raven sort of falling out of favor? Is this political? Was it his performance? What was it?
Well, and when you kind of look, and we're going to get to the entire show of Destination X, the matchup, and look, old man, I think we reported on it. Old Jarrett kind of got sideways, and he wasn't happy with it. But at the very core, at this stage of both of those guys' career, Raven and Dustin, it was a bad mix. I mean, we're going to get to that here in a little while with Billy, with Kip. When guys get to a certain level and a certain stage, and when you're asking them to do something that, as I kind of referred to earlier, get out of their box or get out of their lane, it's just not going to work. And that's what the situation was between Raven and Dustin. They didn't have good chemistry, and it's of no surprise to really anybody involved. But Dusty had a matchup, and it was what it was.
We got to ask about Monty Brown. It's being written here that he's kind of frustrated with his declining push. He feels like it's been scaled back ever since Dutch Mantel lost some power in the office. I guess there is a discussion that he's going to be programmed with Triton, and Monty thinks that's setting him up to fail because Monty knows that he's kind of green himself and he's not going to be able to carry another green fellow. I think that's fairly logical of Monty Brown. Was he right to be annoyed with this idea?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Again, this is a set of circumstances that Dixie wanted change in the creative, and at this point was trying to maneuver and, okay, get Dusty in there. But Dusty, to his defense, he didn't know who Monty was. And like any person that gets into that creative role, they need to go with, I'll say, talent that they're familiar with, that they've had success with, and put their head around. It's not that Dusty didn't like Monty. He just wanted to kind of say, okay, let me get the pieces of the pieces that I want on the chessboard to play chess the way I want to play. And Monty, again, not that Dusty didn't like him, but he was going to take him from a different lane, if you will. And prior to that, it was Jeff and Dutch and others, and Dutch had a real good relationship with him. And so, whoever's reporting on this, they probably got some stuff that was close to accurate, that Monty was frustrated because, quote unquote, man, Dutch is out of power. I'm kind of getting lost in the shuffle. And there was a little bit of validity, or a lot of validity to that.
I want to ask you about Jeff Hardy, because there's something written in the torch that I think is interesting. And I'm wondering, do you think it's changed? Because I used to hear this all the time. I don't know if it's as big of a deal now. The torch would write, Jeff Hardy shows up on time for most shows, but wrestlers say his new habit is leaving the building long before the show comes to an end. And I know that for young talent, that was always the rule. And I guess it's sort of the unwritten rule now that you stay and watch everybody's matches. But respectfully, I can't tell you how many times I hear about a guy doing his job, and when he's finished, he jumps in the shower, grabs his bag, and he's gone long before the show is over because he wants to beat the traffic, get to the next town, get to his next flight, get back to the hotel, get dinner before the restaurants close, whatever the case may be. Did the professional etiquette of staying to the end of the show go away and become a thing of the past, like the limp handshake, or where do you land on that?
Well, and back in that house show grind where you can really, I'll say, sit under the learning tree and absorb and watch top guys do what top guys do, and have the opportunity to either ride in the car with them or chat with them. But, yes, it was, I don't call it a pet peeve. It was just, a guy starting a territory or starting the territory in the Tennessee days or the WWF days, and out on the road, and they're on second match, third match, and they come back, shower, and leave before first intermission. And they're guys that really need to learn and understand. You better believe it rubs people the wrong way, and they're really missing the opportunity. And because it to me, it's just a blatant signal and saying, look, I'm more interested in not learning or doing whatever than learning. Guy like Jeff Hardy, he wasn't going to learn anything sticking around at a TV taping, watching 4 to 6 minute TV matches. And so, again, another clickbait news article that served its purpose. But for the most part, I am a huge proponent of young guys. I don't care if it's TV or not. And I'm, if you really want to drill down to it, I encourage guys, don't watch a monitor. I know some buildings you have to, but if you can get up in the, even backstage, if you can get up and listen to the people, there's so much you can learn by listening that I just think is slowly dwindling away. I don't say a lost art, but there's a lot to learn to reading the crowd and listening and watching. But more importantly, I just think listening. So anyhow, yeah, that's my take on it.
Let's talk about Chris Candido. He's going to make the torch, and it says Chris Candido has a good reputation in the locker room thus far. He deserves a second chance, one wrestler said. He's not a great worker like he used to be, but he still tries hard, another wrestler would say. And it's made clear here that Tammy Sitch has not accompanied Chris on any of his trips to Florida. So maybe, I don't know, it feels like a backhanded compliment, but a compliment none the least. We'll take it where we can. Did Tammy come to any of these early shows? I know that he's not here long before he loses his life, but was she a presence at all in TNA?
I don't believe not one time. My best recollection, Tammy never showed to a TNA show.
Were you guys not interested in doing anything with her? I mean,
I think at this point, and I may be wrong, but I don't think Chris was interested in bringing her around, or Chris was trying to get back on his feet. And maybe that was coming later once he got more on firm footing. But to my knowledge, Chris was, and I think the Chris I saw at this point, Chris came to Tennessee when he was a teenager. And then, I'll call it the Smoky Mountain and different times, but, the WWF run. But I think as Chris grew as a performer, by this stage, yes, it was at the end of his life. We just didn't know it, but he had turned into a hell of a season, more than just I don't say he was ever just a high spot guy, but man, he was a polished worker in a lot of ways. But no, Tammy wasn't ever a part of the discussion to my best knowledge.
This may have also been where, respectfully, Tammy didn't look like Tammy. So maybe she wasn't interested in making appearances.
Gotcha.
But hey, listen, if you'd like to look like Tammy, how about some Factor? Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Well, Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can feel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. And you can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. That's based on a randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Of course, your results will vary based on your diet and exercise. But with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use the code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. So let's talk about the pay-per-view. We're finally here, and what a pay-per-view it is. Dave would have this as the headline. TNA streak of first-rate pay-per-views came to an abrupt halt with the Destination X show that looked bad on paper, and unlike other recent shows, didn't have a few off-the-charts matches to save it. This was a show that showcased the worst the company has to offer. Many of the matchups didn't look good, and many the people just didn't care about. The booking was badly overdone, with repeated run-ins and ref bumps. The crowd, which has helped make the TNA shows to see on pay-per-view in recent months, couldn't save this. It's as if they weren't nearly as hot as usual, partially because they were given little aside from the X Division Challenge to get excited about. So it's a full house, 775 fans, but Dave is down on it. When you think about 2005, is that a year where the company is kind of in transition? Would that be a nice way to describe it?
We knew, yes, transition, hit a plateau. just where were we going with all of it? I mean, we had, man, just the whole journey and getting to do My World Weekly and when we do the TNA episodes, you can just see so many things, hindsight and clarity. But when you drill down on 2005 and you think through Fox Sports Net and prior to Spike and the talent and the Dusty, I'll call it experiment and all that, Dusty taking the reins here. Again, he's, a generation above me that we just didn't hit the mark. I'm not saying by any stretch I always hit the mark, or me and my crew hit the mark. But on this card, when you look at it, I don't think there were any guaranteed slam dunks, show stealing, quote unquote, total nonstop action matches, a la whether it was a tag or a single, but enough of the X Division style. And we got a little top heavy with, again, you're talking about the year of transition. I won't get too far into the matches, but I think we got a little top heavy of brand name versus brand name. And that is when TNA would always get off kilter and evoke the emotion. Man, have they lost their way? Are they in transition? Put it politely, that was kind of a bad show. Meltzer, he said came to a screeching halt. That when you look in the show in totality, we didn't have any, as the kids say today, we didn't have one banger on it, pal.
No bangers. You hate to see it. This is an era where it's announced too that you guys are going to be consolidating some tapings. You're going to do your first triple taping on March 15th, another triple taping on April 5th and the 26th, and then double tapings in May. So we're trying to, get our arms around the business of professional wrestling. And sometimes that means you got to adjust the sales and cut some costs. Let's talk about the undercard. We got Chris Candido teaming with Andy Douglas to take on Lex Lovett and Buck Quartermain. They go 7:58, and Candido pins Quartermain after a diving headbutt. Then we see Kid Cash team with Lance Hoyt to take on Cassidy Riley and Jarrell Clark. Lots of big moves in 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Cash gets the win over Clark with the moneymaker. And now it's time for the actual pay-per-view. We've got Team Canada. And this iteration is Bobby Roode, Petey Williams, Eric Young, Alistar Ralphs, and both Scott D'Amore and Johnny Devine, who's got crutches because he's got a torn MCL and a torn ACL. They're going to be at the corner, of course. Standing across from them will be Chris Harris, James Storm, Conan, and BG James. They go 8 minutes and 53 seconds. It's written here, Ralphs is a big bodybuilder type who's like a cross between Triple H and Daniel Rodimer. WWE has scouted him, and I'm surprised they didn't sign him. He's very green and wasn't in much. Let's talk about him. We haven't spent any time talking about him, really. Why do you think he didn't become a bigger star with you guys?
A1?
Yeah, Alistar Ralphs.
Yeah, and it's for years. I had him in my phone as
A1. Yeah.
And he started anyway, top of the alphabet. At the end of the day, he was in Team Canada, and it's really hard to break out. That image that was just shown, Eric, Bobby, Johnny Devine when he was healthy, but Petey Williams, that group is just mega talented. And so to try to kind of cut through that clutter, all due respect, those three guys, they're just well-rounded. It was hard to, at the end of the day, that was the problem. He was put already into a group, and by design, he was quote unquote the worst worker of the bunch. And that really wasn't fair to him, but that was his role. And he never really, for us, broke out of that.
There's also a show-long experiment with a clean-shaven Johnny Fairplay, who just had a birthday last week. Shout out to Johnny. Happy birthday. But it's written here, hey, they paid this guy 6 figures. Meanwhile, Jim Mitchell lives right down the street, and they stopped using him. The skit is, he's trying to get his job back. He's doing whatever they can. He's being turned down by America's Most Wanted. They're throwing hay all over him. They're having James Storm put a saddle on him and ride him. He's being turned down by Team Canada. He finally gets hired by Lovett and Quartermain. Johnny Fairplay tells him, "You're my favorite Lex." And they agree to use him as their manager. Clearly, we were trying to get some mileage out of Johnny Fairplay. And man, he's a heat magnet, and we know that, and we love him for it. But it does feel like this was just a miss. I don't know if creative didn't have the right idea for him or what. When should the Johnny Fairplay experiment have ended?
Well, and see, the experiment is as if there was a continuous, because to me, I always looked at Johnny. He was in, he's out. He was in, he was out. He was in, he was out. There was never any long-term play, and certainly in my line of thinking, or me and my creatives team line of thinking, if you will. But when he was, I'll call it, a part of the TNA family, sometimes more than less. It just kind of ebbed and flowed. But I think Dusty looked at his, I'll call it, blank sheet when he first kind of got in there and said, all right, I'm going to, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm not going to, maybe I'm going to appease Dixie, or there's a little bit of a storyline here. This kid's got a little notoriety, or he wanted to give him a shot as a manager. But to me, the fair play experiment was always in it just never full-time, always very, very part-time. So I can't really say when it should have ended. Some people will say, and Johnny's oh boy, he's a character through and through. But man, a lightning rod of emotion. Some people will say that experiment was over before it started. But gotta love Mr. Fairplay.
It's so crazy to me that he has such heat. I mean,
I know. And he always had that before. He's one of the guys, and I don't want to get into that kind of list, but he had heat before he really ever performed.
He didn't do anything to piss anybody off, and they already hated him. It's magical.
And I always kind of looked at that as an upside.
Yeah.
But being a commanding presence, because in this era, and now so more than ever as the business goes along, but you kind of look at the dominating heel managers through the years and their, I'll call it, commanding presence. That's the thing that I always wanted Johnny to have a little more of, but that wasn't who he was. He innately, he was a guy that you just wanted to smack the shit out of. But anyhow, enough's enough.
Next match is Chris Sabin and Chase Stevens. They go 6 minutes and 18 seconds. Candido and Douglas were at ringside interfering regularly. I absolutely love Candido in this role. He's working like Mad Dog Vachon coming out of a box. That's the way Dave Meltzer would write it. And I could not tell you how much I enjoyed his very brief stint. But it was fantastic. I also want to mention that Shocker is the masked wrestler who's going to unmask, and it's made to be a big deal on commentary. Mike Tenay is pointing out that Shocker is one of the biggest superstars in Mexico, that he wrestles before 12,000 people every Friday night, that he's the current NWA light heavyweight champion, and that everyone has seen him in the McDonald's commercial. And even Meltzer says, I've seen that commercial dozens of times. 2.25 stars. How happy was Dusty that he landed Shocker?
And that was, I don't think Dusty was a big lucha star, but he damn sure knew the commercial. But he knew enough, and his relationship with Tenay, people, and I think we touched on it a couple of episodes ago. I mean, at one time, Shocker was, quote unquote, the Rock, the Hulk Hogan, the Stone Cold of Mexico, but his own inner demons that never, continued to pan out. But for a short, and look, again, the Hispanic audience is something that from day one we wanted to try to tap into, and this was another experiment, if you will, into that.
The next match on the show is Dustin Rhodes and Raven. They have a bull rope match that gets 1.25 stars. Some pretty clever bull rope spots here, according to Dave Meltzer. Fans are chanting "Gold Dust" at Dustin. Of course, Dustin is the one who gets the win as well. My favorite spot is in this one as well. I've always loved when Raven would do the drop toe hold onto a chair spot. I don't know why that spot still resonates for me. What did you think of that spot the first time you saw it? The drop toe hold onto the chair.
Loved it, and did it with him over and over and over. You know, it was kind of one of his go-tos. Maybe you call it a signature. He did it well. And look, Raven, he will never ever be accused of not coming to an arena without ideas. He was not just creative, but he would think it through, and he would know that the simple psychology that I've got to look good and my opponent's got to look good, but most importantly, the match has got to get over. Now, look, it's subjective, and you can have different opinions, but Raven, from a real match construction point of view, very, very good at it. But you know, there's so many other variables that go into it, but he was a thinker. And so that drop toe hold spot, he would put it in, that's where I was going. He would put it in different places in his matches that would get, he'd get the best ROI out of that spot.
I should mention too, because the fans are so familiar with it, when he sets it up, Dustin actually reverses it into a bulldog on the chair, which is a nice little spin. Dustin picks up the win. Now we've got Team Tracy, which is Ron and Don Harris beating Team Trinity, which is Phi Delta Slam. Well, it said that the PDS guys were really exposed. They were gassed bad. It should have been a pre-show match. Half a star. I know they're Dusty guys, but Phi Delta Slam probably wasn't ready for pay-per-view. Fair to say?
Big old boys to this day. Me and Tilly still stay in contact and text about college sports and mainly football. But yeah, but because they didn't have enough TV time, look, they're in ring work. Yeah, maybe they might have gassed on a pay-per-view, but there was no quote unquote build. And I don't know exactly where they are on the show for whatever reason. I don't know if this is a show. I think they were on much later than they should have been. But anyhow, entertaining. Maybe at this time they had zero story to make this match mean anything.
Well, next up is another stinker. Monty Brown and Triton go 526, and Dave would say it's hard to believe Triton applied for Tough Enough 3 and was turned down. Well, until the match started. He played Power Man. He screwed up a press slam right away and dropped Brown on his shoulder. Brown did a very good job of carrying Triton, at least considering Brown's level of experience. The match wasn't that terrible, but the finish was. Brown gave the 300-pound guy a fall-away slam and set up the pounce. The lights went out. When they came back on, another masked man was in the ring, and Triton was gone. He has the power to transport himself. It was actually Dennis, Mitty, and Knight who never unmasked, and Brown gave him the pounce for the pin. Brown then saw Triton still on the ramp. Dusty had planned to make Triton a new version of Nikita Koloff, but it's a different era, and he was totally unimpressive. Dud. So listen, the Triton experiment fizzles fairly quickly. And Monty Brown can't be happy about being in the middle of this.
No, and Triton wasn't ready, but man, great guy, nice guy. But it goes back to, and look, I look at, you know, dealing with in my day-to-day world now, and I get different calls from independent promotions. Not always, hey, can you do this or do that? Hey, what's your opinion on this and that? And there is just so much more work out there this day and age, like across the country, coast to coast. Or I mean, shoot, in Canada, UK, I mean, Australia has a independent wrestling scene. It's just, it's a different day and age. When we're talking about 05, you know, WCW was only 3 or 4 years closed. We're starting up. Ring of Honor's kind of running their limited shows, but independent wrestling just wasn't what today. So here's a guy like Triton, Ryan, great look, wanted to learn the business, wanted to understand it, wanted to get more reps, just wasn't out there at all. And on the job training. And Dust used to say, hey man, we don't have time to train guys to put them on TV. That ain't going to work. And, you know, so then when you make creative decisions, you may go with a guy who maybe been around too long, but it's a lot safer to put him on than a guy that just isn't ready for TV.
We got to take just a minute here and tell you about conradsguy.com. If you're a small business owner and you're not growing your business through digital, you're missing out. I started doing this 15 years ago, advertising on radio and TV, and I knew, hey, I need to get some digital advertising. People were telling me things like SEO and pay per click and targeted display. I didn't know what the hell any of that was. So I called my radio and TV reps and they sold me an order. They took my money. They placed it, I guess. I'll never know because I never got any leads and I didn't understand what the hell was going on in the first place. I needed more leads and I needed an understanding of what I was actually buying. What I needed was a professional like Eric Nichols and my friends at Envision Marketing Consultants. I'm not involved. I don't own this business, but I am co-signing it and endorsing it because they really did help me. And I want you to go see what they can do for your business at conradsguy.com. I'm talking to you if you're B2B or retail or food and beverage, manufacturing, nonprofits, hell, even mortgage companies. He helped me and he can help you too. And here's the deal. If he takes a look and says, hey man, you're on the right track, he'll tell you that too. If he can't help you grow your business, he won't waste your time. But if you're looking to do things like SEO or pay per click or targeted display, or maybe you'd like to get some streaming video ads on Hulu or YouTube or Amazon, if your company is doing any of that or wants to do any of that, conradsguy.com can help. Take the advice. There is a learning curve on these things. I have paid what I call the stupid tax for tens of thousands of dollars before I figured out the right partner. And for me, that's Envision Marketing Consultants. I really believe in Eric Nichols and his crew and what they can do. So if you're a small business owner, maybe you have a landscaping service, maybe you have a plumbing business, whatever it is, you need that phone to ring. You need more business. You'd like to make 2025 better than 2024. Well, conradsguy.com can help. Go check it out. You'll be glad you did. Get on track. Start making more money. Get more leads with Envision Marketing Consultants, where smart but simple marketing drives results at conradsguy.com. Next up, man, do you want to talk about something that looks unbelievable on paper? This is it. It's Jeff Hardy and Abyss. And just saying those two names in TNA lets you know it's going to be a crazy spectacle. Now let's sprinkle this on top. It's a Falls Count Anywhere match that goes 15 minutes and 48 seconds, and it's billed as Falls Count Anywhere in Universal Studios. And I guess the guys had a lot of great ideas for this stipulation, and then they were shut down and were told they couldn't leave the building because Universal wouldn't look kindly towards it. I think it would have been pretty wild to see Jeff Hardy taking some crazy dives and bumps off of roller coasters or into the waters or whatever it may have been. Was that the original plan and then Universal shut it down, or what was the thinking?
I mean, and you know, we were talking about that schedule a little earlier on the month to month, and I was going to go back on that. But you know, we are in a it's a new relationship with Universal, and so when you're sitting down with the backlot team and knowing just a little bit of how the place works, and then when you're in the creative room and knowing, okay, could we go to the backlot and do this? So yeah, we had different ideas and concepts, but did we really think we could do all of them? No. Could we do half of them? We wanted to see if we could get one or two across the finish line. But the reality was we were still new enough in our relationship that, look, we talked about that cadence of taping, and that was nothing more than between pay-per-views you did it's either 5 weeks or 4 weeks. On the weeks that we had to do 5, you know, there's 52 weeks a year, and you're going to do monthly pay-per-views, so you're dividing that by 12. And so sometimes we had to do two shows every other week, and then the other times we had to do 3 shows, and so that kind of broke down. But when you're down there, so twice a month, and getting into the DNA of park operations, we couldn't always get what we wanted to be done. But this is the best match, even though they didn't get to do what they wanted to. Oh, Hardy and Abby, they super hard. And a lot of times when I look back on things now, Abyss would push Jeff in a real fun way. They enjoyed working with each other.
It's it just feels like a match made in wrestling heaven. Like these guys are supposed to wrestle each other.
Yep.
They get 2 3/4 stars. Of course, there's lots of thumbtacks. Hardy's going to have his back cut up. I mean, he's got dozens of fresh small cuts here. Abyss even winds up breaking 2 fingers on a bad landing on a table spot here. I mean, this is just crazy stuff here, but I can't help but wonder, oh, what could have been. This is probably my favorite match on the pay-per-view just because I have such fondness for both of these guys.
Yeah, best match of the show, in my opinion. By far. By far.
Next up is the Outlaw, the former Billy Gunn, and Kevin Nash in what's called a first blood match. Meltzer would say the match had no heat, and the so-called big stars only have a short shelf life. It was just bad. The Outlaw got a toolbox from under the ring and pulled a screwdriver out. Anyway, let's keep going. They're doing lots of craziness. We're using bolt cutters and we're removing the turnbuckle padding and exposing the turnbuckle, and we're using the guardrail and the chair and a screwdriver and the snake eyes on the exposed metal. But when he does it the second time, Billy's head comes nowhere close to the metal. And unfortunately, that's the time he decides to blade. And it was obvious, the camera caught that his head wasn't close, and now he's bleeding, even though he missed by a couple of feet. So here comes Jarrett from the back with a belt shot, and it's written that that one misses by 2 feet. And he decides to blade on that one as well. A guy in a white coat then wiped the blood off Outlaw's face, and he did it so well that Outlaw had blood streaming down his face anyway. Charles got up, sees Nash bleeding, and calls for the bell, ruling Outlaw, who's also bleeding, as the winner. If this wasn't enough of a comedy of errors, the post-match brawl was to end with Nash giving Outlaw a proper power bomb, and he got Outlaw up, but then his legs gave out and he lost his balance, and they both went down. Nash sat down for a while, almost identical to Vince McMahon at the Rumble. Eventually they got up, so at least he was okay, which is the only positive thing I can say about this match. Dud. Here in the South, we have a phrase that when something is just screwed up in every direction, like as try as we might, this thing just ain't going to make it.
What do you call it, Connie? What do you call it?
We call it snake bit. This thing's snake bit. This match feels snake bit because, Lord, everything they're trying, and it's not like they're half-assing it. They're really working, but it's almost like Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will. Is that the way you would classify this match? I mean, I feel bad even dunking on Billy or Kevin because it's not like these guys don't know how to work or don't know what to do. They just had an off night at the office, right?
So I don't want to rain on Dusty. God rest his soul. But and the amount of screw ups, if he's sitting here today, I could write down a list of a lot of what the hell was Jeff thinking. But when I hear Kevin Nash versus Billy Gunn, I just got to ask myself, Dusty, what in the hell are you thinking?
Yeah.
It just, and look, Kevin is 6'11", big old dude, but you've been up close to Billy. He is a big man. I mean,
Hulk Hogan level.
Dude, he's just big and thick and everything that goes with it. So out of the gate, yes, they did their best, worked their ass off. That just, and again, they're late in the show as well. That was going to be tough. It wasn't a good show, period. And I know that the prior 2 months were very, very good, and December was good. But come March, Destination X, we laid an egg. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Match 8 is Christopher Daniels winning the X title in a 4-way over AJ Styles, Elix Skipper, and Ron Killings. It's a confusing series of matches, is the way it's described, according to the Observer. But of course, due to Daniels and Styles, it blew away everything else on the show. It starts out as a tag match with Daniels and Killings taking on Styles and Skipper. And it was noted that Dusty Rhodes refused to allow Daniels to team with Skipper because of a stipulation a few months back that they weren't going to ignore. I was about to think he should be named the new president of the UFC until I remembered all the Fairplay skits on this show. Killings looked out of his league here. Plus, he was noticeably bigger than everyone else. It is interesting. You know, when you think about the X division, I think about all of these guys except Ron Killings. It's a different style, right?
And again, just kind of the mashup booking here, and the convoluted rules to this to right now, I don't think I completely understand them starting out as a tag. Yeah, the whole breakdown. But Ronnie was always a single in the heavyweight division or a tag, super entertaining. But putting him in the X division, it's as if, you know, because I think Brian and Conan were on earlier in the show, but like, okay, where are we going to put Ronnie? Oh, let's put him in this X division. It just didn't feel right. And again, I know Dusty wanted to change things up, put his flavor on it, do everything that had a little the gold dust on it, if you will. But this was another swing and a miss. Just a styles clash, pardon the pun.
Listen, we hear it all the time. Whenever you see a show with a ton of gimmick matches like this, people inevitably go, "Oh, Russo." Well, this wasn't Russo. This is Dusty, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's where, look, every booker, creative person has their not just off nights, kind of their disastrous nights.
They're blind spots.
There you go. Well said. And look, yeah, Russo was nowhere around this. He probably can still going to get blamed on some level, but no, he wasn't around this.
I wanted to follow up and talk about the main event. Jeff Jarrett is going to retain the NWA title in 21 minutes and 40 seconds over Diamond Dallas Page. There's a bunch of guys at ringside. We got Tim Daggett, who's the former ring announcer, but turned high-powered but goofy attorney. There's Larry Zbyszko, who Meltzer says, I have no idea why. 3 Live Crew, and he says, can't miss another shot to make Conan look like a goof. The Naturals, Chris Candido, and Monty Brown, which made no sense up until the finish. They appeared to be lumberjacks, and this looked like a lumberjack match. However, Mike Tenay announced that they were not lumberjacks, and this is not a lumberjack match. Okay, so why are all these guys out at the ringside? And Dusty said they're not to have any physical involvement with the wrestlers. This was like every other Jarrett match. They brawled all over the building. They used garbage can shots. You see where he's going. But help me understand, why was everyone out there if they're not lumberjack? That is weird, right?
Yeah, but Conrad, I cannot recall the reason other than, hey, Jeff, I mean, this feels that Dusty said, hey, let's don't have run-ins. Let's just put everybody out there, and we're going to have these different guys involved. And we know, you hadn't got to a point where we were going for the payoff. I believe this was Waltman's, I don't call it debut, first time ever, but he appeared and the people went nuts. But the finish was the Monty turn. But having everybody out there, the only thing I can recall, or I can't even recall this, my only guess would be Dusty said, hey, let's don't have a bunch of run-ins. Let's only have one run-in, and that being Waltman. Let's have everybody out there. But that doesn't even feel right, Conrad. Again, it's a Dusty show. I'm not exactly sure.
A little bit of ref bumps. Imagine that. Ref Rudy Charles goes down. You get the guitar, and BG James jumps into the ring, gets it from you. Conan's going to hold you. Of course, you're going to move. So BG James knocks out Conan with a guitar shot. DDP goes for the diamond cutter. Billy Gunn interferes, uses a famouser on DDP. Sean Waltman is actually going to come in, and the crowd goes wild. I mean, they're nuts for Waltman. And Meltzer even says, I don't know why. Maybe they saw Surreal Life and realized he'd been living with a basket case for years and had sympathy. Waltman gave Jarrett an Outlaw Bronco Busters. Page then gave diamond cutters to Douglas, Candido, and Stevens. Well, he's a goner for sure now. He set one on Jarrett, but Brown hit the ring, and when Daggett interfered, instead of going after Daggett, he gave the pounce to DDP and dragged Jarrett on top of him for the pin, and then Brown and Jarrett hugged after the match. 2 3/4 of a star. I'm not suggesting that I know anything about wrestling, because I don't. I'm here learning from you today.
Oh, yes, you do.
But Monty Brown as a heel? Like, the fans wanted him to be in pursuit of that title.
Yes.
And the pairing here feels like it's out of left field. And I'm all for a good swerve, bro. Even though this isn't Russo, it's Dusty. What did you think of the pairing with Monty? Not from a you standpoint, but from a Monty standpoint. And what did Monty think?
I don't know what Monty thought. Don't recall.
He didn't push back, is my point.
Dusty's reasoning is, let's don't have you chase right now. Let's get you in alignment with Jeff. And then when the time's right, we're going to run the angle head up, you and Jeff. And of course, he'll be the natural baby face and people to see my ass get pounced and me to lose the title to him and all that. So this was, I call it Dusty's chess move. Again, getting his pieces of the puzzle where he wanted them for long-term booking, if you will. And he thought it would be best get Dusty in alignment with me as opposed to chasing me right away. That was his logic. I think for the most part, Monty was professional enough, respected that and bought into that. I bought into that. Like, okay, this is where he wants to go with it. It's easy to sit here today and kind of point fingers at that. I'm trying to recall who the April we got into the cage matches, but kind of where things were going. Again, difficult time because I'm sure he's got Bob Carter in one ear, Dixie in another ear. He's trying to, build talent. He's trying to get people in the positions he thought to draw money. But the move of Monty switching heel at the end of this was controversial. And obviously it didn't bear a lot of fruit in the months to come.
We know that DDP is going to have 4 more matches with TNA after this event. Did you hope that he would stick around longer? Did you know going in that this is going to be short term? Talk to me about DDP.
I knew he had a good relationship with Dusty, but I will tell you this from the day that I really I met DDP in Memphis in the late 80s as he came down and he managed Tanaka and Diamond. That's how far back we go. But from the WCW working days, and look, his worth ethic, and he prides himself on this, and to this day, his internal motor is what keeps him going. And at this stage of his career, I think you said we went 21 minutes. DDP is, I was gonna say but is a very focused hard worker. And in my opinion, that goes a long, long, long way. And I was in favor of keeping DDP around as much as he wanted to. But again, a dollars and cents issue, like so many things were in those days, especially 05, it was a real challenge. So he worked his ass off. The people, he was over. I mean, you can go back and watch this, and I can criticize myself a couple of different ways, but at the end of the day, the people were with this. And, you might not have liked the result, but the heel turn of Monty was a very interesting, but it was closure for this chapter. So it was I thought, a compelling way to end the pay-per-view.
It is interesting to look back at this era of Dusty's booking in TNA. I want to mention that the cover story is not this pay-per-view in the Observer. The cover story in the Observer is about Spike TV pulling out of the negotiations to renew its contract for Monday Night Raw. Here's the official statement where Spike is shocking the television industries and WWE officials on March 10th when they released a whopping 2-sentence statement that says, "After several months of negotiations, we've decided to end our discussions about extending our relationship with WWE beyond September 2005. Moving forward, Spike TV will expand its investments in original programming and new acquisitions for its core audience." Of course, both WWE and Spike were publicly and even privately mum after this release. And the only thing Spike officials would say is that wrestling didn't draw the ad dollars commensurate with the audience it drew. And that's been the case, of course, since the beginning of time. But they said wrestling in their mind was not a growth industry, and that the money WWE was asking to renew the contract was ridiculous. Now, this would normally be something both sides would talk about a lot more publicly. And this winds up being one of the biggest stories of the year in wrestling, and really just a major cable television story, because Raw was always among the top rated shows on cable. And even in the final 2 weeks of February, it was ranked number 1. So when a network comes out and says, hey, we got the number 1 show on cable, but we ain't renewing it, that's got to come across your desk and feel like this could be the golden opportunity we've been waiting for. How did you receive that news, Jeff?
Well, the first thing, I mean, like a lot of things, and like Conrad, you can imagine, I knew, okay, there's got to be more than meets the eye. The number 1 rated show on a network for men, and the numbers they were doing, and it was a top 10 network, and how it slotted it, and just, I mean, all factors, it was kind of mind blowing. And this is March, and they're not going off the air. And so you go, okay, Vince is making the chess move way early, but you know, I know a lot more now, and knowing that that relationship was really soured, a year out, a year and a half out, 2 years out. How long were they on there? But it was not a healthy relationship for quite some time. And look, they respected each other, you know, the network being the network and the promotion being the promotion. But I just remember thinking, holy shit, they're leaving. And at that point, it was, is there going to be an opportunity? Because, you know, there are recent history. This is 05. You couldn't have paid to get on TBS or TNT in 2002, 3, 4. They didn't want anything to do with wrestling under any circumstance. So that was the first thing, Conrad, that went through in my mind. Maybe it's contrary to the delusional optimist mindset, but my first inclination was they ain't going to want wrestling. They're not going to want to, quote unquote, downgrade. They're not want to go to another brand. They've had their fill of it. They're not going to be interested. That was my first thought. But man, it was a shocker. I mean, it was a real shocker to hear it and go, and okay, they got 6 months to tell this story of where they're going. Anyway, it's interesting. Do you remember this time frame, Conrad, as far as that Raw, or were you not watching wrestling at the time?
No, I was watching. I was in, and I thought it was in.
Go ahead.
Say again.
It was huge news.
Huge news. And it's apparent to me, and boy, I'm not trying to throw shade at WWE, but Spike was basically saying, you're not going to leverage us to get a better deal from USA. So go get what you can, but we're not interested in renewing it. I thought that was such a bold move. And it feels like, you know, they're trying to sabotage whatever potential upside there is on another deal, because they could have played the part. I mean, we've even heard Vince, I guess we've heard stories where Vince would say to talent, hey, see if you can get an offer from WCW. And the idea being that he's going to feign interest and maybe he can drive the price up and take care of the guy. Well, now it looks like somebody's sort of undercutting him in his business to say, no, you're not going to play that game with us. We won't participate. It's kind of a big deal.
It's huge, but man, obviously we're on this side of it. That's how bad the relationship had soured.
Yes, absolutely. That it became, even though it's not personal, and I'm sure on some level people say it's just business. Sometimes business feels personal. This feels a little personal, Jeff.
It was very personal.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, we know that's going to represent a big opportunity. Of course, a decade later, Meltzer would report that the reason Spike gave TNA so many extra months on the air after canceling Impact so they could find the new network partner is that Spike brass felt regret about how they treated WWE on the way out, not just sabotaging these USA negotiations, but also to try to get them to stop plugging the move back to USA Network on the air. What do you make of that? That perhaps the brass felt like they had done WWE wrong and they wanted to be above reproach in their dealings with TNA years later?
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of that. And obviously I'd already left, but I know for a fact that the Spike executives on a personal level, like the TNA group, on a professional level, they had lost all confidence it was a really rough 30 seconds. That final term of the contract, that last contract, it went south. I don't say the day it was signed, but it just didn't turn out that well, and they were ready to part ways. What is the term, Conrad, that we've used? They consumer confidence. So it'd be brand confidence. They had lost it completely.
Well, we haven't lost any confidence in you, Jeff, or the audience. So next week we're throwing you guys the keys to the kingdom. We want to know, what would you like to ask Double J? Because next week it's Ask Jeff Anything right here at myworldpod.com.
Right on.
If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell, because we're going to do this one live next week, live on YouTube. So you can get your questions in now using the hashtag Ask Jeff Anything. We'll make sure to make a post on social about that, looking for your questions. But we're also going to be live next week on YouTube, taking your questions, and we don't want to miss you. So make plans to be with us next week right here at myworldpod.com. You'll be live and able to interact and ask questions to Double J, but only if you go right now and hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell. That's myworldpod.com. To be clear, that's our free YouTube, folks. myworldpod.com. Jeff, I never know what to expect when we sit down and click record, but we're like an hour away from Raw on Netflix beginning, and this feels like it's going to be major history. I got my fingers crossed for a big John Cena moment. I'm sure we'll break it down next week, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I also want to mention that AEW's had a string of really, really great television shows lately. If you've been skipping here or there or trying to fast forward or you can't catch it all, I want to encourage you, start paying attention. They're headed to Philadelphia for a big pay-per-view. They always deliver for the sickos, and there's no town sicker for wrestling than Philadelphia. Tickets are on sale now at AEWTIX.com. I've seen AEW in person 4 times this year, and well, I'm making a little trip to Dallas this Thursday, so stay tuned.
All right, Connie. Right on. That's what I like to hear.
We'll have some big news for you next week right here on My World.
Peace.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-Free Shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.